Hello, my name's Noel Kingsbury, and with my colleague Annie Guilfoyle, we run Garden Masterclass, which started about 6 or 7 years ago, putting on live events in the British Isles. We've since moved on to become digital, and we have a considerable output of webinars, and nearly all of these are recorded and made available online. And that's webinars with leading global experts in the garden and landscape world. We also do this once a week event we call Thursday Garden Chat, which is a public service broadcast. All of these get recorded and put onto our YouTube channel. This is all done for free, and we very much appreciate donations, and you can make a donation from the homepage of our website. Now, over the next month, over the Christmas period, we've got a showing of our film, Wildside, the story of a garden, about the extraordinary garden in Devon made by Keith and Ros Wiley. And you can find out about that on the films page on our website. Our first webinar of 2024 will be with Julie Moyer-Messervy, who is a really, I think, especially insightful garden designer based in New England, not so well known on our side of the Atlantic. So that'll be a great occasion to hear from, I think, one of those garden designers or landscape designers with a really special way of looking at space. There's one other event which I'll tell you about for next year, and that's the Bad Botany course with Caroline Jackson. Caroline is a teacher of horticulture in England, and this will be an introduction to basic botany for gardeners, and she works her way through several plant families. We did a version of this last year, and I think we all learned a great deal from it. So do please look at our website, see what we offer. We've got hundreds of hours of inspiring and informative content online, and I hope you enjoy this particular recording. Now, this evening, I'm afraid I'm on my own because poor Annie is ill in bed with a cold and sounding fairly grim. So she's a silent presence this evening, and we all hope you get better soon, Annie. Now, our guest this evening is going to be talking about her desert island gardens. And this was an idea we had, I think it was Annie's idea actually, a couple of years ago, that we should do something that's a bit like the BBC longest running radio program, whereby famous people choose music that illustrates key moments in their life. What we ask people to do is think of the 5 gardens that they would be dreaming about if they got stranded on a desert island. To talk us through those gardens in terms of the development of their career. And we also asked them to come up with a garden tool they would not want to be without, and a garden book. Now, this evening, we've got Clare Foster, who is the gardens editor of the British magazine House and Garden. So welcome, Clare. I know it's been a difficult decision choosing the 5 gardens, but first of all, perhaps could you tell us a little bit about your work, what it actually means to be the gardens editor of a quality magazine like House and Garden?
Well, I absolutely love my job. That's the first thing to say. And I've been doing it quite a long time. I've been at House and Garden for 19 years this February, which is quite terrifying. And my job there is a freelance one. So I go into the office one day a week, sometimes not even one day a week. And the rest I do from home. So I have plenty of time for going around gardens. And it's my job to select the gardens for the garden section in the magazine. That comes down entirely to me. And so I commission writers, I write pieces myself, and I commission photography for the magazine as well. And it's a job, it's a very visual job, but it's also a very sociable job. You know, I'm always out meeting people, going around gardens. And the garden world, as everyone knows, is a very pleasant world to be in. So I feel very lucky.
Great. Good, good. Yes. So perhaps now if you could share your screen and you
Okay.
could talk us through your life in 5 gardens.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to I'm going to start by just giving you a little bit of background as to how I got to House and Garden. Um, I actually started off my career in book publishing. I worked for a tiny art book publishers called the Herbert Press. That was my first job. And then from there, I went to Thames and Hudson. And I've kind of worked between the editorial department and the publicity department at Thames and Hudson. I was writing catalogue copy, and I was also, sending proofs of books out to magazines and newspapers. And at Thames and Hudson, I worked on a book called Derek Jarman's Garden with photographs by Howard Suley, which I absolutely loved. And I can remember sending the book proofs out because there was no email at the time. It was, just literally physically posting proofs out to magazines. And I sent proofs of Derek Jarman's Garden out to Gardens Illustrated magazine. And I can remember coming across that magazine and thinking, gosh, that's a lovely magazine. And I didn't know garden magazines could be like that. It was very visual, beautiful photographs. And I really kind of engaged with it. And while I was at Thames and Hudson, I decided that I wanted to work on a magazine. And it wasn't necessarily that magazine that gave me that thought, but book publishing was quite slow and notoriously badly paid. Not that that particularly made a difference, but I just had the feeling I wanted to work on a magazine. So I started applying for jobs on all sorts of quite unsuitable, boring magazines. And then one day I used to get The Guardian and read The Guardian on a Saturday, and that's where all the media jobs were. And there was a job there advertised, a sub-editor for Gardens Illustrated. So I applied with no experience, no horticultural experience and no journalistic experience, and got the job and was just literally thrown in at the deep end and found myself in a great place. I loved it. And Rosie Atkins, who was the editor at the time, she became a real mentor to me. She was absolutely brilliant. And I think she could see a spark of interest in me. And she slightly nudged me into getting an allotment. I was living in London at the time and had a balcony or windowsill to grow things on and didn't have a garden. So I managed to get an allotment. I think I probably skipped the waiting list. I think I said that I think I dropped that I was working for Gardens Illustrated and managed to skip the waiting list and got this allotment and started growing things and just completely engaged with it from day one. Really, really loved gardening, much to my mother's surprise. I think my mother's here actually, so I think she still can't believe that I do what I do. But yeah, started growing things and really, really engaged with the whole thing. And I was at Gardens Illustrated for about 8 years and then went to House and Garden. It coincided with having babies and working full time didn't quite work for me. So I just couldn't do it all. So when the job at House and Garden came up, it was freelance and part time. I just thought that's the job for me and was lucky enough to get that. So a lot of my career has been kind of by accident. I still have never done a horticultural course, but I still garden. And I think that's the key. But as I said before, visiting gardens is something that I've done for the past, 25 plus years. So I visited a lot. So selecting 5 for this Desert Island Gardens has been impossible, but I've done it. And the first garden is Great Dixter. And I don't want to apologize for this, but I know that you all know Great Dixter very well. And so I grappled a bit with it because I thought people might want to, see something more interesting. But Great Dixter was very formative in my early career at Gardens Illustrated. It was possibly the first garden I went to see when I was at Gardens Illustrated, and I started learning from Great Dixter right from the start, and I'm still learning. It's just one of those amazing gardens that's always changing. So Rosie Atkins knew Christopher Lloyd, and Christopher would invite us as an editorial team at Gardens Illustrated down to see him at Great Dixter. So we would go for lunch, and Christopher would cook for us. There were, I think, probably 6 or 7 of us in the editorial department then. And we would sit in the kitchen at Great Dixter and have lunch. And he was a great cook, actually. He cooked, I remember, some really delicious fish dish and then a brilliant apple pie. And then on that particular day, he suggested that we went up to the roof at Great Dixter and looked down over these amazing gardens. And that really was amazing, and it stayed with me. And I love Great Dixter because it is so experimental. And Christopher Lloyd, of course, was a great experimenter. He famously tore out the Lutchens Rose Garden and replaced it with the Exotic Garden. And I'm not sure, I can't remember whether it was Christopher Lloyd or Fergus who let this beautiful meadow grow long around the topiary. But thank goodness they did, because look at all those orchids. That was in 2021 when I took that picture, and Fergus was so excited to show us these amazing orchids in the meadow grass. So what I thought I'd do is share some pictures from Fergus's book, which I think is called Great Dixter Then and Now. And this is a picture of Daisy Lloyd, who's Christopher Lloyd's mother, in the long border. And it's so recognizable, isn't it? Because the framework of that garden is still there today. And yet the planting changes so radically all the time. And I think it shows how you can use planting and planting alone to change the mood of a garden, to change the atmosphere, to change the tone of it. And this is the same long border, photographed in highly saturated colours, which were very popular at the time in magazines and things, and with Christopher Lloyd's highly saturated colours and clashing colours. I think this was taken in 1994, so his heyday, really. And then the same long border again in Fergus's time. This is 2014, a very tasteful, very lovely, soft herbaceous border. You've got the Ami in the middle there. So Fergus, I went to one of his successional planting courses, which was brilliant, and learned all about his pocket planting. And so he orders these borders so incredibly well. The other thing that I did with him was in lockdown, he did those lectures, and I listened to one on winter planning. And for them, winter is such a key time, because it's just all that preparation for then the garden to kind of meticulously go through the seasons. And he literally delineates the spaces on the ground for these pockets that he then puts bulbs and annuals in. And I think I kind of do the same in my garden, because I always have gaps that I fill with annuals, but they're not planned pockets. But maybe I should start calling them pockets and not gaps. And these are my photographs of the long border again, I think 2021, and the border has changed again. It's got this backbone of shrubs, but I think Fergus is putting more shrubs in now to make the border a little bit more sustainable. Shrubs are less thirsty than the herbaceous plants, and it's just got a different feel yet again, and it's still changing. And there's the man himself, of course, Fergus, who I've learnt so much from over the years. He looks a bit like a Turkish shepherd or something, with holding that staff. He really carries that garden forward in the same spirit as Christopher Lloyd, with that sense of experimentation. Some of the plants that he puts in are quite phenomenal. You've got these giant fennels, which I absolutely love. And I think his planting on the picture on the right here, I'm not sure whether that's the long border, but it's quite eccentric. You've got, I'm not sure whether these are giant fennels actually, but they probably are, kind of shooting up out of the herbaceous border at various heights. And it's not conventional. It doesn't play by rules. And this is what I love. And I think sometimes he comes in for a bit of stick. You know, you read these TripAdvisor reviews, don't you? Sometimes they're really critical of the garden because it's not tidy or the plants aren't labeled, you know. And I think we just have to start thinking about gardens in a different way now. And we'll come on to more of that later. I put this one in. It's it's an area of the garden near the sunken garden. It's a pot display, and of course there is a more famous pot display every year at the front of the house, either side of the porch. And they use pots really well at Great Dixter. But I put this in because I don't particularly go for those colours. It's not exactly to my taste. But Fergus is always pushing out boundaries, and you know I think he did a pot display at the front that was full of weird conifers one year, and it's not always to everyone's taste, and that's good. I think the pushing boundaries thing is something that we all need to do. But also as a garden editor, as an editor of features, I have to make sure that we are getting variety into the magazine with the gardens I select. So if I selected, you know, all the gardens that I personally am drawn to, you know, I love naturalistic planting, I love quite soft planting, I like meadowy planting, and if I chose every single garden along that aesthetic, then the magazine would look all the same and it would be utterly boring. So I have to stand apart from myself sometimes and be completely impartial and choose things that I wouldn't necessarily myself particularly like. This is my last picture of Dixter. This is quite personal to me and quite emotional because it was just before lockdown, and I saw a picture on Instagram. I still love Instagram because you know, we share so much on it, don't we? But Fergus had posted a picture rather like the central picture of the fritillary. And I just thought, I want to be there. I want to see those fritillaries. And it was at that time in mid-March 2020 when lockdown had just been announced, and we knew that the whole country was going into lockdown. We knew we wouldn't be able to move around, and we knew we had to pretty much stay indoors. But they gave us a few days grace. So I rang up a friend. I said, let's go. And we got in the car. Well, we rang Fergus first, actually, because it wasn't officially open to the public. And he said, yeah, come down. And we went on the most beautiful blue sky day down to Dixter and just immersed ourselves in these fritillaries. And it was so magical, but more heightened because we knew that we were going into lockdown. And I think the memory of those fritillaries and and my photos of the gardens that day just really kept me going in lockdown. And also I think it really says something about how nature can be so therapeutic and so helpful when everything else around is not so good. So this is my second garden, Plas Brondanu in Snowdonia, which is very different indeed to the rest of the gardens that I've chosen. It's quite personal because it's near to our family cottage in Wales. So I've been to this garden over a period of many years, and I go repeatedly and love it every time. It's very unchanging because it's full of this green architecture. It's the creation of Clough Williams Ellis, who was an architect in the early 20th century. And he was the creator of Portmeirion, which is nearby. So he's well known for that Italianate village near Portmaddock. And this was his family home, his own home. His father gave it to him as a birthday present, as one does, when he was 25. in 1908, and he lived here, I think, between here and London for the rest of his life until he died in 1978. It's a very architectural garden, and he wrote that he was inspired by Italian Renaissance gardens, and it does have that clipped feel about it, but it's not classical in shape. It's not symmetrical, and it's very quirky. So all these topiary forms are different sizes and clipped in different shapes. That's why I love it, because it has such character. It's eccentric, and it has a sense of humor to it. There's this tall column in one of the compartment gardens. Just has this rather tiny midget like centurion on the top, and there's another statue that is a cherub that's he's been turned into a fireman with a hose, and it sounds a bit naff, but it's not. It just has a sense of humor to it, and I actually wish that I could have met him, because I think he was we've gone too far on. He would have been a really interesting person to meet. So there's lots of stonework in this garden as well, lots of detail. And you get this lovely ironwork in this Portmeirion turquoise colour, which is the estate colour. So it's a very dramatic garden and a little bit kitsch, but just really, really good and really fantastic at any time of year, as you can see from this slide. So the next few photos were taken by Andrew Montgomery, and I commissioned him to do a feature on this garden in the middle of winter, and we subsequently used the pictures in our book on winter gardens. And he literally went in a blizzard, and he was driving through Snowdonia. I didn't go with him on that shoot, actually, which I'm slightly thankful about, because he was driving through Snowdonia, ringing me going, I don't know whether I'm going to make it, because the snow was getting deeper. And he got there and was literally taking photos in a blizzard, as you can see. And this photo shows a bit about the layout of the garden. So you've got this big kind of rather dour grey stone house that overlooks the valley, and it's on a slight slope. So you've got a lawn at the front, and then on the near side here, there's an avenue of topiary that frames a view out to Snowdonia and Knicht Mountain. And then at the far side of the garden, there are compartments and little anti-gardens that are delineated by these yew hedges. It's just such a lovely garden to explore. I took my kids here, and they used to love just running around and getting lost and playing hide and seek. A few more pictures of it in snow, and you can just see these fairly eccentric topiary forms. Just nothing symmetrical. I just love it. And this is a kind of a theatre made of yew framing another statue. And then outside the formal garden itself is a hillside, and there's this wonderful small folly of a tower, and it looks really old, but it was built in 1915, and it was a wedding present. I think some of his friends gave him some money, and Clough Williams-Ellis had it built to commemorate his wedding in 1915. And again, it's just so romantic and fun. My kids just loved running up this hill and going to the top of this tower, and you get the most fantastic views to Snowdonia from the top of the tower. So now to Morocco. This is my third garden, Rahuna in Morocco. So this is in the north of Morocco. It's near Tangier. And I first went to this garden 6 or 7 years ago on an assignment for House and Garden. So we featured this garden with photographs initially by Nok Min Go, who is an American photographer. So it's the creation of this man, Umberto Pasti. He's an Italian novelist, and a garden designer as well. So he has a flat in Milan and a house in the middle of Tangier, where he has another garden actually. He is an inveterate storyteller. He's such a good storyteller, and he tells the story of how he made this garden, or decided to make this garden. So he came on a walk from Tangier, which is about 15-20 miles away, and he fell asleep under an olive tree. And he said he woke up and just knew that he had to make a garden here. He had a dream. He said that the spirits, he called them the jinn, talked to him and told him that he had to make a garden here on this inhospitable hillside. And so he did. And this was 30 years ago now. And it was such a difficult thing to do, because in Morocco, land ownership is just really complicated, and lots of people kind of owned the same bit of land. So he had to unpick all that, had to go through lots of legal stuff, and finally was able to buy a patch of land. And he's created this garden with the help of the local village. So he's basically employed lots of people from the village. He has really helped that village by connecting it to the outside world, because even though it's only 20 miles from Tangier, it was not connected at all. There was no proper road, and he's helped build a road. He's brought money into the village, and he's done amazing things like basically help all the girls in the village to go to school. So the boys used to go to school, but the girls didn't, and now all the girls go to school. And he encourages the locals to make crafts, and he sells those. And he's really he's a a real hero in that village. So he, having bought the piece of land, he built this quite a modest house. It's a tiny stone house. And then he started to carve this garden on the hillside in terraces. And it's not a formal garden at all, and it's just organically evolved over all the years. And if you can imagine that this literally was a stony hillside, I think one of the pictures later on, you'll see that the rest of the countryside around it is quite barren. And he's planted trees, and he's planted, so many different plants. And there are lots of different parts to the garden. There's lots of places to explore, lots of different types of types of area in the garden. You've got these exotic plants in one part of the garden. In another part, there's roses and poppies, and the Englishman's garden, he calls it. He weaves all these stories around each part of the garden. And then this picture is a bit macabre, but he calls it the bone tree, but it's actually very beautiful, and it's quite sculptural in a way. It's all the skulls of the animals that have been dug up while he's been making this garden. He's a great collector of objects. So all his, I say all his houses, both his houses in Tangier, this little stone cottage and his house in Tangier, are full of curiosities. So he collects pots, he collects bits of pots, he collects tapestries and paintings and seed heads and whale bones for some reason. And so his houses are just like these cabinets of curiosities. And in the same way as he collects objects, he collects plants. And this is the most beautiful bit of the garden to me, is kind of up on the hillside above the terraces of the immediate garden, where it's not really a garden, but he's taming the wild. And he collects endangered plants. So this is Iris tingitana, which is the local tangerine, as they say, iris. And he's collected narcissus, local narcissus that are endangered, and he literally goes to building sites, I think, and digs up these bulbs before everything just gets ruined. I think Tangier's a bit like Marrakesh was 25 years ago, and it's going through quite a lot of development at the moment, and a lot of these indigenous plants are being lost. So he's taken it upon himself to go and collect these plants and keep them going. It's quite extraordinary, but it's also just so beautiful up there. You have these wild sweet peas and other plants. Just here we've got Ornithogalum arabicum, and I saw some alliums, wild alliums, Allium roseum, and also these amazing Gladiolus byzantinus, just meadows, a meadow of this Gladiolus. It's just absolutely stunning. And I think this garden, it's quite rare. It really kind of spoke to me and it moved me. And there's something about the atmosphere of a garden when you have to get up at, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning to go and see it, which if I'm with a photographer, I quite often get into a garden at dawn because you get the light. Actually, this photograph was taken in quite bright light, but yeah, for a magazine, if I'm on a shoot, I'll be getting up at dawn, and that's a magical time to be in a garden because the light just imparts a completely different atmosphere, and the birds just starting to sing, and it's amazing. I feel very lucky to be able to do that. So from one wild garden to another, and this is Knepp, which I'm sure a lot of you will know and will have heard of at least. So I put this in because it sits with the kinds of gardens that I'm starting to see a lot of at the moment. It's really with that current zeitgeist of gardening with the environment, gardening for climate change. And over the past 3 or 4 years, I've been learning so much about this from different gardeners who are doing different things to combat climate change. I've been working on a series called Climate Crusaders for House and Garden, and interviewing amazing people, you know, Charles Dowding, John Little, Ian Tolhurst, who's an organic market gardener, and just learning what they're doing to combat climate change. And one of those people that I interviewed for that series was Isabella Tree. And of course, I was talking to her about the whole huge rewilding project at Knepp, which is just monumental in scale, of course. And it was fascinating, and she's incredibly articulate and incredibly knowledgeable about it all. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I also came away feeling that the whole thing was quite not inaccessible, but just slightly difficult to understand for normal gardeners because it's on such a massive scale, and not many people have, you know, thousands of acres in their estate, and herds of deer and cattle and pigs and all sorts of animals that come and manage the vegetation in that rewilding system. So when she talked about the walled garden, and on that same visit showed me the early stages of the walled garden, I was really interested because I just thought that that's going to be on a scale that people can relate to more, perhaps. So what they're doing at Knepp, I think, is absolutely fascinating, intriguing, but and also just very beautiful. If you like that wild, that kind of natural aesthetic, which I do. So Tom Stuart Smith designed this space, came up with a master plan. It's a 1.5 acre walled garden, and it used to be very conventional, a croquet lawn with a pool, and then a kitchen garden in the other half. And it was, you know, with the croquet lawn, monoculture green grass. It didn't sit well the rest of the estate, which was obviously being managed in a very different way. So Isabella knew that she had to do something radical with the space, and I think they've done something really quite remarkable. So the other side of the garden, the kitchen garden, they've made into an edible garden. But this side, that's shown in this slide, is, I think, the most extraordinary side to the garden, the wild garden. So what they've done here is that they've sculpted the land here into a gentle kind of topography. So they've created mounds and dips and different areas of different soil types to encourage more biodiversity. So I mean, I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here, but just in case, just to kind of spell it out, because it took me a while to get my head around why it was a good thing to plant in these different substrates and these impoverished substrates. They've used crushed concrete here. So what you're trying to do, if you're planting in a very poor substrate, the nitrogen guzzling weeds, so nettles and docks and things like that, are not thriving, and so they're not posing that competition to other things, and so therefore you get more biodiversity, you get more plant life coming in, and biodiversity was the absolute buzzword here, and you can just see in this photograph how much you've got there. It's absolutely extraordinary. And biodiversity was increased even further by having the different topography, because you've got sunnier, drier areas, and you've got shadier, wetter areas. And so, you know, the number of plant species that you can get in is amazing. So this is the new vegetable garden which is now an edible garden. I think quite loosely edible. There's some really interesting plants in here that you can go and forage. But the main structure is still there. The glass house is still there, and I think they left some of the original green architecture and some of the yew, which they prune like goats. Apparently, Tom Stuart Smith came and demonstrated to the gardeners how to prune these existing yews as if they've been goat pruned or nibbled. So you can still see that there's almost the remnants or the feel of a traditional kitchen garden here. You've got the rows of crops still, but lots of things self-seeding all around. So you get that biodiversity coming in. You get the insects coming to these plants that will then, you know, predate on all the pests that you might get on your crops, and it's just a win-win situation, and just interesting to look at, I think. And actually, I'm going to read you something that Charlie Harper, who's the head gardener there, said. He said, "You have to adjust your eye when you come here. Do you see untidiness, or do you see opportunity? Think of your garden as an ecosystem, and a whole host of possibilities will be unleashed." And I think that really kind of says it all. It just, you know, do you see untidiness or do you see opportunity? And I see opportunity. And this is Charlie himself. He's an absolutely brilliant gardener, and he explains, and when you go around, he does these safaris, which are really good. If you haven't been on one, do go. He explains how it's all managed, because of course this isn't a rewilded garden. It is carefully managed, and that's, I think, difficult for people to get their heads around as well, because all these things that are self-seeding in the gravel have to be carefully observed, and if anything's taking over, then it has to be edited out. So it is that process of editing and carefully managing. They equate it to the animals managing the vegetation out in the kind of main parkland. So they, as gardeners, are acting like the animals. They are pruning and they're weeding out, they're pulling out, and they're scrabbling out things. So it's just a very interesting and a new way of gardening that I think we all have to kind of get our heads around somehow, adjust our expectations of gardening, and garden in a more sustainable way. They don't water this at all. That's one point that I should have made earlier. They just don't water this at all. So it's much more sustainable than a traditional herbaceous border. And this the final slide here. It's a snapshot of all of the diversity that you're getting. So you've got this lovely Dianthus carthusianorum. You've got Berkea purpurea. I didn't know what this was, this white daisy, and Charlie told me it's mayweed, Triplerispermum inodorum. And he says that actually can start to take over. He has to be a bit careful with it. So that's one of the plants that they have to really watch. And there's agave ovatifolia, Helichrysum orientale, Euphorbia segeriana, a little echinops. So I mean, it just goes on. It just is incredible, and I think very, very beautiful as well. So we come finally to my garden, and I think this may be cheating, but Annie assured me that I could put this one in. So when Noel first briefed me on doing my desert island gardens, he said it's the gardens that you dream about the whole time, and I do dream about this the whole time, and you know, it's literally always in my mind, and you know, I can't sleep at night, and I'm planning new planting combinations, and it's just constantly on my mind, and I'm in there doing it the whole time. So I thought I'd end with this one, and also I think it ties in a lot of the things that I've been talking about, because all the gardens that I see in my working day are influencing me and influencing what I'm planting, influencing how I'm gardening as well. So this is my own garden. It's a third of an acre in a village in the Berkshire Downs, and I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. So it's this part of the garden here is the front garden, and it used to be completely just gravelled over with nothing in it at all. And where this picket fence is was a huge laurel hedge that just took up half the space and made it really dark. So literally 2 or 3 weeks after we got in, that laurel hedge came out, and the expanse of gravel, I just ate into it with some brick edged beds. And so I'm using that gravel still because I'm letting things self-seed into it, but I've also created some structure. So this is another view of the front garden. I've created structure and then put a kind of froth of flowers in between. So I've got hummocks of planting here. Now, this is a garden that I couldn't quite get in, and I didn't actually have good photographs of because I went to see it a long time ago. But I was very much influenced by a garden that I saw quite soon after I started at Gardens Illustrated. We went to France, and with the whole magazine actually. So the magazine was owned by John Brown Publishing, and he used to take us on trips to France every summer, the whole company. It was quite incredible. And the Gardens Illustrated editorial team decided to go off on a jaunt one day to see Nicole de Vaisian's garden. And that has stayed with me ever since. Just the most amazing garden. And she was still alive at the time, so we met her, a very chic woman, and a garden that just made entirely of evergreens, evergreen hummocks. And I think that look, that gentle kind of those rounded shapes have lived with me ever since. And so the anchor of this front garden are the hummocks that appear now outside. At the moment, you can that green structure, that green architecture is there. And I've got 3 quite large now clipped teucriums, teucrium fruticans that kind of dance across the garden. And they remind me of Nicole de Vazian's, actually, because she definitely had clipped kind of grey-green plants, probably Ducrium, definitely lavender and Santolina. And then this slightly mad cottage garden planting in between. So we have euphorbias, we've got that rather mad pink geranium, which is called Tiny Monster, which is a monster, it just goes everywhere. And then a stalwart, which is Cenolophium denudatum, which is the Baltic cow parsley, which I think is one of those plants that is good in different seasons, because it starts off with lovely apple green flowers that then mature to white, and then it fades, and the seed heads are really strong, lovely kind of rich brown, and they stay all winter. So it's a really fantastic plant. It's self-seeding everywhere, so maybe slightly a thug in my garden, but I don't mind because I love it. And this Centranthus is even more of a thug, but I love that because it always attracts, without fail. I sit inside and at my desk and see the hummingbird moth come and land on that every year. I'm always looking out for it. And a tapestry of other things that I see along the way in gardens that I visit. So this wallflower, Erysimum apricot twist, I think I first saw in Jasper Conran's garden and just took endless pictures of it and wanted it. It's an occupational hazard. I see things and I covet them and I have to get them. But this garden is designed for that, because I can just, it's slightly mad, it's not planned, I can just slot things in. We'll move on. So another view of the front garden, and this plant is so useful, Dianthus carthusianorum, which is this pink meadowy plant here. And you'll see more shrubs along this border here, which give structure. These shrubs, worth mentioning, because again, I got them along the way in another garden visit. So I think it's Hebe salicifolia, but I've never been able to completely ascertain that. I got it when I went to Monet's garden in France. I didn't take a cutting from that, don't worry, I didn't steal one. But the head gardener of that garden at the time, I don't think he's there anymore, James Priestley, we went to his private garden, and he had that plant growing, and he gave us cuttings, and I brought them back, and they're going really strong. It's a very, very fast growing Hebe that can be clipped, and it's all over my garden now. It's brilliant, and all over my friends' gardens. And then we go around to the side of the house now. I'm just taking you on a little tour. Hollyhocks love my garden, and I love hollyhocks, so that's fine. They just self-seed in the gravel everywhere, and I arrived with two colours. This dark purple one, which came from my mum, originally from a packet of Gardens Illustrated seeds. So there's a history in that hollyhock, and I love the fact that it came via my mum first and then back to me. So I brought that from my previous garden, and in my previous garden there was an existing red hollyhock, and the two have now just hybridized to make this forest of hollyhocks. And everyone who walks by, we're in a village, and on the lane, so people walk by and they love my hollyhocks too, and I like that they love my hollyhocks too. It's it's nice that they can keep other people happy. And then you go around the side of the house to the back of the garden, and this is a kind of big curving border, and I planned this border quite meticulously before I'd even moved into the house. At that time when you're kind of exchanging contracts, you got that interminable time before you actually move in, and I'd done a planting plan and thought it all out in my head, so it was pretty much ready to go as soon as we got here. But that planting plan has evolved because it was too tasteful. It was too pastel. I had lovely things like this phlox Monica Linden Bell and the Annabelle hydrangea and lots of very kind of lovely tasteful things. And my kitchen is right over there. There's a big bit of lawn in between me and the border. Not necessarily as much sorry, start again. A bit too much lawn for my liking, actually, but it has to be there for my husband. My boys are now 19 and 20, and they don't kick footballs around, so I'm gearing up for a bit of a change, but he doesn't know that yet. So anyway, I was looking at it from the kitchen window over this lawn and thinking there's nothing that stands out. So I put in some colour, and I like injections of colour. I like kind of splashes of colour rather than big, huge, unsubtle blocks. So I put in just 3 plants of Helenium. Helenium signs early, and they've grown. Of course, the clumps got bigger, but just those 3 single plants were enough in quite a big border to give that splash of colour. And then I infill with bright cosmos as well in my gaps or my pockets. This is a Dahlia australis, which is quite subtle, actually, very, very small flowers. But it just definitely needed a little bit more colour. And then I'm just going to whiz through these next photos because they show the same part of the border through the seasons. Because one of the things that I really tried hard with over this border is to make sure that it's got something in every season, and I think it works. So this is in winter on a lovely frosty day, which sadly we're not having at the moment, are we? We're just having lots of rain and lots of greyness. So I'm longing for another frosty day. And then this is really early spring where I've got lots of Honesty, Corfu Blue and tulips. And then that's taken over by the forget-me-nots when the tulips are still out. And then we come to a beautiful late June. And I think probably this is the best time. So late June, early July is the garden's heyday, really. You've got these lovely upright verbascums. And lots of different textures. I love different shapes in plants. So it's not necessarily about the colours, but it's a lot about the shapes of the plant forms, the flowers. I think that's really important. And I've learned that along the way as well by visiting different gardens. And then we're going into autumn here. We've got that lovely little aster, which is, well, it's quite big actually, but the flowers are small. Aster turbinellum. And that just keeps the garden going into autumn, and then autumn proper, when it loses its shine, but it still has that structure. And I keep all the seed heads and grasses going right the way through winter. So it's good for wildlife, and it's good when you finally get that frost. And I usually don't cut things back until late February, sometimes even early March. And then it starts again. So that's the end of my little romp through my 5 gardens. I hope you've enjoyed it. And, you know, I really found it hard to narrow it down to my 5. And if I did it again, I probably would have chosen 5 very different gardens. But thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you, Claire. That was great. There's some wonderful photography as well. Yeah, very jealous of your hollyhocks, because we always grew fantastic ones in Herefordshire, but can't seem to get them going here in Portugal at all.
I think they have their own minds, don't they? They choose where they want to be.
Yeah, so they have additional seasonal stresses here. Yes, glad you included Plas Brondano. It's one of those places that it is quite quirky and individual, like its creator. And you know, he needs to be recognized, I think, as the actually a really special garden, as indeed was Port Marion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And actually, you can go to Plasbron Danau or
Mm.
Danu. My Welsh pronunciation isn't very good, no. But you can go at any time of year to that garden,
Yes,
and
yes.
there's an honesty box system. So
Mm, mm,
I
mm,
definitely
mm.
recommend it. It's a fantastic
Yes.
garden.
Yeah, 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 yes. Yep. So, any questions? Nice to see you in the audience. Andrea, do you know all of these gardens? I suppose you probably do.
Oh no, I didn't know the one in Tangiers.
No,
Certainly.
no, that sounds really
It-
special, actually. Yeah.
yeah, I must say my ears certainly pricked up with that one. That's really, really gorgeous.
Mm.
And I don't think I've ever seen your own garden, Claire. It's absolutely
No, that
beautiful
looks
as
lovely,
well.
doesn't it? Yes,
Have you
yes.
Yeah.
been here, Andrea? Oh, you must come.
I'd love to. I really would. No, it looks amazing. And I have hollyhock jealousy too. I
Really
can't get
lucky
them
thing.
going here. They
Yeah,
really don't like Southwest Scotland at all.
yeah. Anne is reminding me that we need to ask you your tool and your
Oh
book.
yeah. Okay. I've got them right here. Okay, my
Jolly good.
tool,
Oh, well,
Jacoti
yeah.
Jacoti hand shears.
Yes.
Brilliant things, and I actually do sell them on my website as well. Sorry, had to get that plug in, but I've used these for 15 years, and yeah, they are just brilliant one-handed topiary shears, and they're self-sharpening, and they're actually made in Greece, and they're designed for shearing sheep, but they are really good for
Gosh,
topiary
wow.
pruning
Yeah.
and cutting back perennials.
Yeah.
So that's my tool, and then guess what my book is, Noel? One of
Oh,
your
right. Oh, yeah. That first book that I did with Pete. Yes. Oh,
so
really? Oh, great.
yes,
Right.
yeah, genuinely, and
Yeah.
I'd kind of forgotten that you were involved with this as well. But it's
Yeah.
yeah, Pete Aldolf, Designing with Plants.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's the book that over the years I've used the most. When I
Really?
first
Really?
moved, yeah, when I
Yeah.
first moved out of London, I used this book when I planted my first
Yeah.
garden.
Yeah. Yes.
So really useful.
Great. Oh, thank you. That's great. Mm. Okay. Well, that was really, yeah, some fantastic images there and really inspiring. So thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Hope to get you on here again sometime. We must
Definitely,
think of other things we could do together.
definitely.
Annie is saying thank you very much and happy Christmas.
Oh, thanks,
Of course,
Annie. I
this
hope
is
you
our
feel
last
better.
Thursday garden chat before Christmas and New Year. We start in January with, I think we are doing a we're restarting on the 11th of January with Andy McIndoe. We're going to be having a chat with one of Britain's sort of long-standing horticultural experts about his career and how he sees gardening developing. And we've got a whole load. I think we're booked up until well into April actually with these events. We're going fairly global and a lot of very varied stuff we've got for you. Anyway, have a wonderful Christmas and New Year, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.